The Boys is a show that has exploded in popularity due to its incredibly interesting premises of celebrity worship and a darker and arguably more realistic look at superheroes, where instead of being selfless guardians of the public, they instead exploit this power to control and fulfill every single one of their desires.
And I can do whatever the f I want.
From this story, one character in particular stands out to all watchers, a character whose simple presence on screen makes the watchers freeze up in suspense. A character who seems to always captivate each scene they present themselves in. This character can create suspense and be ever so frightening even when all of his cards are shown on the table, simply due to the immense amount of power he wields and how unpredictable he is. He is, in fact, so big of a presence that I promise most of you already know exactly who we're talking about, and that is none other than the Homelander.
Had that extremely uncomfortable feeling Homelander evokes in both the people around him and yourself when watching him on screen. This stems from none other than his ability to walk the fine line between being an emotionally unpredictable person and being eerily cold and detached. To understand the root of this characterization, we need to take a deeper look into his tendencies and where it all stems from: mommy issues. In truth, there's a lot more that went into creating the character of Homelander. While many people want to simply label him a sociopath, the truth is his character is a lot more nuanced. We actually don't believe Homelander is a textbook-born sociopath, but instead a caring and loving person at heart, turned into a pseudo-sociopath due to his environment. In this video, we'll be taking a look at where exactly the line is drawn between a non-sociopath and a sociopath, specifically how Homelander dances along this line. Let us first explore what exactly sociopathy and psychopathy, or more specifically, antisocial personality disorder is. We'd like to clarify that the points to be made in the video relating to ASPD and Homelander are not at all indicative of ASPD's real-life occurrences. We recommend you do your own research regarding ASPD if you're truly interested in it. According to Mayo Clinic, antisocial personality disorder is a condition that dims one's consciousness and empathy. Essentially, ASPD leads a person to have little regard for right and wrong, and ignoring the rights and feelings of others, or in other words, lacks empathy. They also have a tendency to lie and behave violently or impulsively. Think of it as having your consciousness, or the voice you have in your head that tells you what you're doing is wrong, to be dimmed or silenced.
At first glance, this seems to perfectly fit the character of Homelander, as he seems to identify with each criteria, in particular the lack of empathy. Most of their life's choices are determined based on the logical benefits or disadvantages, and not really based on the emotions other people would feel as a result of their choice.
Don't die with them.
So even though Homelander exhibits many of the symptoms of a sociopath, and many people agree he is one, we think what bars Homelander from being a true sociopath is the fact that he is an at-heart emotional character who is shown to possess intense emotional reactions and relationships, and even empathy at times.
You do. But it's okay. We're not alone anymore. We have each other.
We instead believe that he's a product of how a harsh environment and immense power caused an at-heart caring and loving man to turn into what we'd like to call a pseudo-sociopath. A sociopath that is made based on their environment and only exhibits some symptoms of ASPD.
I told Dr. Vogelbaum that the subject was obviously suffering from isolation-induced depression.
We will first start with describing traits that Homelander shares with ASPD, evidenced by moments in the show, then move on to moments where Homelander proves he does not actually completely align with sociopathy, and then finally investigate the circumstances and situation that led to Homelander's transformation into a pseudo-sociopath. Taking a look at a list of symptoms of ASPD provided by Mayo Clinic, we can very clearly point out some that seem to relate to Homelander. Most notably, and what we're going to be talking about, are being hostile, aggressive, violent, or threatening to others, using charm or wit to manipulate others for personal gain or pleasure, having a sense of superiority and being extremely opinionated, and feeling no guilt about harming others.
Let's start with Homelander's erratic and unpredictable behavior. Throughout the show, it is apparent that Homelander has very violent and impulsive thoughts, which he often acts on. Homelander sometimes regulates his emotions and controls himself. However, this is not due to him actually caring about the effect it will have on others, rather the effects it could have on himself, which seems quite indicative of narcissism, another symptom of sociopathy. An example directly from the show's second season comes when Homelander arrives at the anti-soup Victoria Newman-led protest, where the protesters publicly lash out at him, and as a result we see him snap and laser the whole crowd, giving into his emotions and acting erratically and violently. This is however revealed to be a hypothetical fantasy playing out in Homelander's mind, showing his violent tendencies, which again could arguably imitate those of a diagnosed sociopath. One might argue that this is simply an intrusive thought that isn't concrete enough to be seen as sociopathic behavior. However, seeing how Homelander has killed multiple people without hesitation before, we'd argue that he would definitely do it if he could not be traced back to him, and ruin his reputation. Also, it seemed too intense and real to be an intrusive thought, showing how Homelander truly relishes in these fantasies. With this given scene, it gives a clear indicator of how Homelander thinks with an amplified, violent overtone.
It's not just the impulsive behavior which suggests sociopathy in Homelander. Ingrained within the character's actions and dialogue is a manipulative ability to charm other characters and even the viewers. This started with him evoking a false sense of security that he could proceed to tear down, since we all thought he was actually a good superhero akin to Superman. However, it's now evolved more so to creating a level of unease and suspense in each of his scenes once his character was more well known.
Yummers.
Since we understand the things he's capable of, but he still seems to put up a facade regardless. A clear instance where we can see Homelander's luring and charming side is when he confronts A-Train about his physical state. He starts off very kind and friendly, giving off that Superman trustworthy presence, effectively giving A-Train a false sense of security, which he can then completely tear down through his fear tactics and overall terrifying presence. We can even see A-Train engage in the friendly conversation, a bit taken aback perhaps by the surprisingly friendly demeanor put on by Homelander.
Shake Shack? Oh. You want one? I'll go grab a PA.
Oh, no. Thank you, though.
Yeah.
Only to be ridiculed and shamed in a much more hurtful and unsettling manner.
Guess you wanted to cram in as much fat as possible, huh?
Due to the fact that his trust was broken instead of Homelander just outright coming off as harsh.
Nothing?
What did you say to me?
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean it. Say it. I'm sorry.
Say it!
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
These scenarios make light of how the general public remains partially oblivious to the true motives of corporations like Vought and heroes like Homelander, with the people being blind to the higher-ups' true intentions. Ultimately, Homelander's charm serves as a facade, masking his true intentions and highlighting the depths of his manipulative tendencies.
Putting aside his charming and alluring manipulative tendencies, another prominent way in which Homelander controls and manipulates those around him is by fear-mongering. Fear-mongering and charm are often used by Homelander to reassert himself and prop up his manipulative tendencies. With the constant acknowledgement of his strength and superiority by Vought, Homelander cumulatively builds up his ego and believes he would be unstoppable to the point where he can blackmail and threaten people, even other supes, with no repercussions. An example of this is when Starlight threatens to release the video of Homelander letting the passengers on the falling airplane die, which she thinks would ruin his career. But he simply states that if Starlight were to do so, he would have nothing to lose, ominously threatening Starlight with his immense power. This ploy works because of Homelander's immense power and the fear Homelander has built around his presence and within his environment in the Seven.
Do I need to remind you of the Flight 37 video?
Go ahead. Release it. Let's light this candle, huh? I mean, sure, I'll lose everything, but then I'll have nothing to lose. Well, I think then I'll just wipe New York off the map. For fun. Because why not?
By completely dissolving Starlight's intent and ability to go through with her plan, this demonstrates just how much of a mental and physical vice the character of Homelander holds against everyone else, presenting a forceful variation of manipulation for those who he can no longer charm his way through, and he's instead forced to employ fear tactics.
See, Starlight, I'd prefer to be loved. I would. But if you take that away from me, well, being feared is A1 okie doke by me.
When one has charm, an impulsive attitude, and especially superhuman abilities, it is not a large leap in logic to assume that this person might also have an inflated ego. Built in a lab to be the strongest superhero of all time and raised to uphold this level of excellence, Homelander's narcissistic beliefs were nurtured in the environment he grew up in. Furthermore, the people around him constantly bending his will gave him a sense of power average humans could never feel. Essentially, the strength and physical ability, which was all given to him by Compound V, gives him an extremely heightened sense of self-worth, contributing to his narcissism, which is a big aspect of sociopathy. The most popular expression of Homelander's inflated ego comes in the form of the now infamous speech scene, where Homelander addresses a large public crowd after dealing with the ramifications of Season 2, by stating that he is stronger, smarter, and better. This can be seen as the turning point of Homelander's public persona, with it dividing his fan base, but strengthening parts of it, to the point where he is still adored. This only feeds into his ego, as he now views his outbursts of emotions as another way to inspire his fans. By not being kept accountable by the people around him, Homelander's inflated ego becomes another contributing trait of his sociopathic nature. As long as there are enough people that agree with him and validate him, he locks himself in an echo chamber of opinions where he believes he is absolutely right and infallible.
However, we can also see that an outburst of this magnitude does not necessarily showcase someone who is confident in themselves, but rather someone who is extremely insecure and who just had an outburst. Everything he says in this moment almost feels like it's to convince himself and not the audience. Just look at his expression when he says that he's better.
I'm better! I am better!
Instead of coming off as some powerful declaration, this instead seems like a moment of relief for him, and that he struggles with self-worth, but in this moment seems to land on the idea that he is better than everyone around him. It just looks like him telling it to himself in order to feel some peace with himself and get some control over his life.
I'm stronger, I'm smarter, I'm better! I am better!
An interesting aspect of sociopathy, particularly with more extreme cases, is the alarmingly low amount of empathy. Sociopaths tend to make decisions that benefit only themselves, without taking anyone else's feelings into account. This ability to value their own motives and wants over the feelings and well-beings of others, or the inability to have empathy, essentially makes them great at being selfish people. This makes them great at accomplishing their own goals, but at the expense of others.
Looking at the list of symptoms for ASPD, we can see 3 points that relate to what we've just discussed. Those points are feeling no guilt about harming others and not being sensitive to or respectful of others. These points demonstrate Homelander's tendency to ignore the emotions and humanity of people that his decisions might affect, therefore potentially proving his sociopathy. Let's look at some key examples from the show that truly show this apathetic behavior. The first and probably most iconic scene showcasing Homelander's villainy is the scene where Homelander and Maeve attempt to save a flight full of passengers. This scene perfectly exemplifies Homelander's decision-making process, as he seems to totally and completely lack empathy for the people on this plane, even disregarding the lives of whole families. Furthermore, this whole situation is his fault, as he's the one who accidentally lasered the pilot and control panel, showing how he even lacks guilt for creating the problem. Going on, Homelander decides that he and Maeve must let the plane crash, and therefore kill everyone inside the plane.
The reason he comes to this decision is one of purely logic and selfishness. He decides that letting them all die in the plane crash could instead serve a positive purpose to him and Vought by being proof that Soup should be given more jurisdiction. This decision is purely logical and selfish, having zero empathy for the people and families he will kill in doing this, even threatening and scaring them into submission. It also showcases another symptom of sociopathy, which is lying, as Homelander has no trouble lying about the situation to further his and Vought's motives. Some more examples are Homelander ruining Blindspot's hearing and telling the suicidal girl who changes her mind to jump from the building anyways. These don't necessarily show decisions where he prioritizes his selfishness over other people's feelings, but rather an amalgamation of things talked about before, like impulsive behavior.
You know what, Chelsea? I think you should jump.
I don't think I want to.
You don't want to? Why don't you show a little follow-through, Chelsea? Jump.
Charm.
Can I just say, that is amazing. And you, my friend, are a true hero. Not because of what you do for a job, but well, because of what you've overcome. All right, so what happens if, I don't know, I do this?
And narcissism.
Oh, please. Oh, God, oh, God.
No. No God. The only man in the sky is me.
But topped off with a complete lack of remorse and guilt with these actions. He feels no remorse for taking away Blindspot's hearing, effectively rendering him useless and leaving him in immense pain. He also feels no guilt or remorse for making a girl jump off a building, but instead makes her do it to take out his own anger and emotions with no regard for how it will literally take a girl's life, instead thinking only of himself and how he wants to do it to let his anger out.
Therefore, all of these things combined, including his impulsive behavior, his charm and manipulation, his narcissism, and his overall lack of empathy all point to Homelander being a sociopath. However, even with all the evidence seemingly pointed towards an obvious conclusion, we still believe Homelander is not a sociopath. We will prove that Homelander is an emotional character at heart and actually craves deep and meaningful relationships, something unexpected of a sociopath. We will show you how Homelander's sociopathic tendencies simply stem from his deprived and depressing upbringing. Let's go through each emotionally meaningful relationship Homelander seemed to have believed in throughout the series. Let's first talk about Homelander's relationship with Black Noir. Taking a look at the spin-off The Boys Diabolicals Episode 8, which has been confirmed to be canon, Homelander accidentally botches a rescue operation, killing everyone, including hostages, all except for one last hostage. Noir shows up, and Homelander, believing Noir would expose him and ruin his reputation, instead kills the last hostage for Homelander, and creates a proper statement for Homelander to tell the public in order to save his reputation. Presumably, this action creates a special, albeit weird, bond of trust between the two supes, which we can see throughout the season. Now, an interesting question to ask is, he friends with Noir because he believes he brings a logical benefit to him, as demonstrated in the Diabolical episode where he successfully gets Homelander out of trouble? This would suggest sociopathy, as according to most sources, sociopaths have trouble forming meaningful emotional relationships with others, and instead form their relationships based on the benefit that the person brings to them.
However, one scene that we believe disproves this thought is actually Noir's death scene. In this scene, Homelander kills Black Noir due to his hiding of Soldier Boy being his father and the fact that he's alive. Now, this scene can, ironically, work in two different ways to prove Homelander is not a sociopath. You heard that right. The scene where Homelander kills his only somewhat friend can actually prove that he is not a sociopath. The first is Homelander's expressions and speech while executing Black Noir. We can see clear and visible distress on his face and in his speech, showing how this isn't some cold-hearted act of power, but rather a crime of passion, where Homelander simply succumbs and gives into his power in order to take out his emotions and take the easy way out. We see this scene not as a ruthless act of Homelander to prove his dominance, but rather a depressing and sad scene of Homelander dealing with people the only way he knows how: violence, or the threat thereof. It makes it even worse considering Black Noir was the only supe Homelander trusted, making this murder one stemming from a feeling of betrayal and vulnerability, something a sociopath would likely not be susceptible to in the first place, as they don't really get emotionally attached to anyone in the first place.
Furthermore, the root of the killing is also one of emotion and not sociopath-like, as it was out of hurt that Black Noir kept the identity and whereabouts of Homelander's dad away from him. Homelander is actually an emotional person and badly wants to have a connection with his father, and we can see that want and desire shown in this scene, especially through Anthony Starr's acting. Therefore, Homelander's relationship with Black Noir actually demonstrates his intense desire and vulnerability in relationships he finds important to himself, therefore proving that he is not a sociopath, but rather a deeply emotionally invested person. The way he kills Black Noir in the end is not indicative of sociopathy, but rather indicative of being with so much power that it's the only way he knows how to deal with tough scenarios. This kill was his most emotional and tragic one yet, proving how he felt emotion towards his once friend, potentially disproving his sociopathy.
Madeline Stillwell is probably Homelander's most disturbing relationship. Stillwell most definitely plays into the idea of mommy issues, which is defined as problems forming or maintaining healthy adult relationships due to a person's insecure or unhealthy relationship with their mother or another female figure in their childhood. It can lead to negative self-image, low levels of trust, and other issues. However, there's also a unique fusion with Freud's Oedipus complex. The Oedipus complex is a scenario detailed by the popular psychologist Sigmund Freud. Now, we know this theory doesn't exactly apply to Homelander, as he is not actually Madeline Stillwell's biological son, and he doesn't see the other parent as a rival. However, there is a more twisted concept that comes into play that really ties in with the idea of mommy issues.
Mommy issues are usually related to a man's behavior, particularly with women and relationships that stem from some sort of problem with their mother. This could be an overprotective and overbearing mother, an abusive mother, or in Homelander's case, a neglectful or totally absent mother. Due to the absence of a motherly figure in Homelander's life, we obviously see how that leaks into his behavior and sociopathic tendencies in his lack of empathy. However, we also see how it has left an emotional hole in him that he so desperately tries to fill. Homelander constantly forms extremely weird relationships with women, with them always having a more maternal feeling. The first and most obvious instance of this was Madeline Stillwell, Homelander's boss and supervisor at Vought. Their relationship was one of extreme bizarreness, with elements of romantic and lustful love, and mother-son caringness sprinkled all throughout. Now, how does this relationship work to prove Homelander is not a sociopath? Is due to the extreme vulnerability and emotional attachment he shows towards Stillwell. We can see him try to do everything he can to please and satisfy her, even if it is at his own expense, which is not really something a sociopath would do unless heavily conditioned to do so.
One might argue that Homelander does benefit from this, as Madeline is his boss. However, we see constant proof of him doing things even when it grants him nothing. For example, two clear instances where Homelander shows genuine emotional attachment to Madeline are the scenes where Homelander watches Stillwell through his own portrait and the scene where Homelander drinks Stillwell's breast milk. In both of these scenes, Homelander believes he is not being watched, showing how his relationship and feelings towards Stillwell are not at all performative, and instead are done completely genuinely. Sociopaths don't tend to act like this, as they most likely would only do the things in the relationship they are required to do to maintain it, and not really feel any real emotional attachment to this person. However, Homelander truly enjoys and is infatuated with Stillwell, which even allows him to be manipulated by her on the basis of love. This, again, is extremely out of character for a sociopath, as they wouldn't be manipulated through love, as they are not really emotionally invested or vulnerable enough to be in a position to be manipulated. However, Madeline is able to control Homelander through his love for her, demonstrating how he is not a true sociopath, as a real sociopath would not be vulnerable enough to be manipulated in the first place. Furthermore, we can see Homelander doing things for Madeline's love and approval, like lasering the plane because the politician on it knew about Compound V. While he still technically benefited from this action, it was clear that this was really only done to please Madeline and gain her approval and not for his own gain, which again is extremely out of character for a sociopath.
Although we've already established that Homelander does not follow the mold of a traditional Oedipus complex, as he was presumably not young when it started, not Madeline Stillwell's son, and not in competition with a father. However, Homelander seems to be in a constant competition for Stillwell's attention with her infant son Teddy, and acts as if he was Madeline's real son and romantic partner. It's a weird, twisted relationship where Homelander has a mother-son relationship with Stillwell and a romantic one, with each romantic scene scene involving them being extremely uncomfortable. However, this relationship can explain a lot and prove Homelander's mommy issues. Firstly, the twist on this Oedipus complex is meant to be so shocking that you can't miss it. Homelander wants desperately to have some sort of maternal figure in his life, and the attention that would come with having a mother, explaining his fierce competition with Teddy Stillwell, and the reason he drinks Stillwell's breast milk, which is to make it very clear that Homelander desires a maternal figure. Furthermore, the Oedipus complex aspect, where he feels sexual attraction towards the maternal figure in his life, shows how he has clearly developed issues in his upbringing, showing how he has trouble forming healthy relationships with women. Now that we've covered Stillwell, let's now talk about her successor as Homelander's weird motherly romantic partner, Stormfront. Homelander's relationship with Stormfront still possesses that lingering maternal dynamic in Homelander's intimate relationship with Stillwell. From the constant approval Homelander seeks to her words of encouragement that Stormfront delivers in a motherly manner. Either way, the way in which the show wants us to perceive this relationship is in a manner where we see that Homelander is opening himself up and letting Stormfront control him and tell him what to do, following yet again this maternal dynamic. This is reoccurring, where Stormfront manipulates and controls Homelander, showing his emotional malleability and the utter control she has over him.
Even after her death, Stormfront's presence still lingers on his mind as he visits her while she is dying, often seeking affection and recounting his days, similar to someone updating their significant other on their life. All in all, their motherly dynamic and the enormous amount of effort put in by Homelander to sustain this oddly Freudian relationship is just another example of how Homelander seeks to find what he was missing growing up in his own romantic partners.
We've talked so much about mommy issues, however, it has become abundantly clear that Homelander also has problems due to the absence of a father in his life, and strongly desires to have and be a dad. We see the scenario in the introduction of Soldier Boy's character, particularly the revelation that Soldier Boy is Homelander's biological father. Homelander, when he learns about this, obsesses over the idea of having a family again, as he calls Soldier Boy Dad, and insistently declares that he is his son.
He ain't your kid.
Yes, I am. I am your son. I am your blood. That's all that matters.
He also tells Soldier Boy, "You see, you have a family. You have him and you have me." This priority is made even more clear when Homelander kills Black Noir, someone who he may not be related to, but someone that has proven time and time again that he looks out for Homelander, showing how Homelander is so obsessed with a blood family that he never really cares about creating a family for himself. We can also see the daddy issues shown in the form of a need to live up and surpass his father, Soldier Boy. Homelander tells Soldier Boy that he's the upgrade, showing how Homelander now feels the need to surpass his father in order to find self-worth. Once again, demonstrating his ego and his compensation for an inferiority complex through his own superpowers. We can see the amalgamation of these parental mental issues culminate in Homelander's relationship with Ryan Butcher. We can look at it as Homelander trying to give Ryan Butcher what he never had, reaffirming that he's his dad, something Homelander was never told himself as a kid. He also goes out of his way to try to give Ryan contact with the outside world, something he was robbed of and resents of his childhood. However, Homelander fails to recognize how Ryan was conceived in the first place, and that is Homelander presumably forcing himself onto Becca Butcher. It's not really a healthy relationship nor family dynamic, as Becca also considers Billy Ryan's real dad, if anyone.
However, once again, Homelander's obsession with blood relations leads him to believe that he has the right to raise Ryan, even though he has done nothing but ruin his mom's and his life. To sum it up, Homelander's relationship with Ryan Butcher demonstrates his resentment of his childhood, his wish to correct things for both himself and Ryan, to give him what he believes is the proper life he never had, and also Homelander's obsession with real blood-related family.
All in all, these relationships serve to demonstrate Homelander's intense emotions and vulnerabilities at times, proving that he is not actually a sociopath at heart. At the end of the day, he wants nothing more than to hold and sustain a meaningful relationship with someone. However, due to his strict upbringing and immense power, he doesn't have the ability to properly navigate these relationships, and instead deals with problems with violence or harsh control.
Nature versus nurture is a classic debate in the field of psychology and behavioral sciences that compares the inherited and environmental factors in shaping human development and behavior. The debate seeks to understand how an individual's genetic and biological makeup influences their personality compared to their upbringing, experiences, and social environment. In the specific case of Homelander, when we try to understand his character, the only variable which can be used to measure this is his environment. If we consider Homelander's behavior as an experiment conducted by Vought, we can realize that his upbringing and the choice to isolate him from the rest of the world abandoned him to grow up without parental figures. As such, the observation that is Homelander's behavior is directly influenced by his childhood nurturing, or lack thereof, and this can be seen in three major areas: emotional neglect, a lack of morality, and finally an identity crisis.
When understanding the cause of these sociopathic tendencies, we need to further define and explore the environment which conditioned Homelander into conforming and believing that these actions were acceptable. One of the most clear-cut explanations for the growth of his sociopathic tendencies is the emotional neglect he encountered during his formative years. Beginning with Homelander's pronounced maternal issues, in the first season, we'd like to remind you of the previously discussed take on the Oedipus complex between Homelander and Stillwell. Seen through their risque interactions with each other, Homelander often seeks her approval and comfort in fetal positions, laying on her lap or chest similar to a child in their psychosexual development stage, as detailed by Freud. Nonetheless, the biggest supporter of this clear emotional neglect is his craving for breast milk, with Homelander having a subplot throughout the show drinking pre-prepared bottles of Madeline Stillwell's breast milk. It's also worth noting that this breast milk was intended for Madeline's biological child, showing a sort of competitive nature that ties into Sigmund Freud's idea of the Oedipus complex.
This desire for breast milk indicates a lack of maturation during the psychosexual stage, which inductively implies that during Homelander's childhood, he clearly had no maternal figure to guide him and comfort him to become a confident and emotionally sound person. By experiencing this emotional neglect from an early age, Homelander becomes vulnerable, with Madeline Stillwell exploiting him for the majority of the first season to follow her and do as she says in a motherly way, whilst keeping a sexual undertone, furthering the Oedipal complex existing between the two characters. Moreover, the obvious hinting at this psychological phenomenon is only deepened when we consider how Homelander is seen to have a distaste against Stillwell's newborn child. Accounted for under the Oedipal complex, Homelander views the newborn child as competition, similar to how children see their fathers as competition relative to their mothers. By presenting Stillwell's son in the first season as a clear competitor for Madeline's attention and resources, it highlights how underdeveloped Homelander's maturity is and how fragile his emotions are, making it understandable as to why he acts erratically and impulsively.
Furthermore, by remembering the discussion around Homelander's relationship with Soldier Boy, we can see how emotional neglect also took place in the fatherly department, as his interactions with Soldier Boy clearly demonstrate a lack of closure and maturity that lead him to commit horrifying acts. When we also consider his sociopathic tendencies, the groundwork for all this comes with Homelander's lack of a moral compass. But where do morals develop? Morals are the differentiation of intentions, decisions, and actions between those that are distinguished as proper and those that are improper. Understandably, the ability to discern morals and norms are established by the environment in which we grow up in, and as such, when children are isolated from figures of authority or guidance, it leads to an inability to control oneself and to differentiate right from wrong. Applying this understanding to the development of Homelander, it is evident that when growing up as an experiment of Vought, Vogelbaum removed all real interaction with others, thus giving Homelander a very bastardized childhood where he couldn't really learn about interactions between himself and the world with proper guidance from loving parental figures. This could have very greatly altered his attitude and enforced a stricter moral compass.
Without any checks in place put in during his formative years by being isolated and then being praised as a superior being, it creates a power imbalance which Homelander himself is not mentally able to keep up, leading to these public outbursts and lapse in judgment. In trying to maintain the two personas he has fighting for control within himself, this notion of imposter syndrome is only thrusted forward when he is treated as a top product by the higher-ups at Vought, who do nothing to keep him accountable, thereby never attempting to prevent his sociopathic tendencies from coming out to the public. Last but not least, Homelander's journey towards becoming a pseudo-sociopath can be traced back to his deprived upbringing and the fostering of an identity crisis. By having all his powers bestowed upon him by Compound V at a young age, Homelander was thrusted into the role of being the greatest superhero. However, the love and acceptance he yearned for were elusive, leaving him feeling isolated and detached from the rest of humanity when he most needed it, leading him to only view himself as a superhero, and never as a regular human being. The immense power granted by Compound V only served to exacerbate his narcissistic tendencies, fueling an inflated sense of self-worth.
Many would assume, and arguably rightfully, that Homelander possesses a superiority complex due to his constant gloating and power trips. However, his narcissism and use of his superpowers almost feels like a compensation and coping mechanism used by Homelander for his subtle inferiority complex. Therefore, we make the claim that on the exterior he shows a superiority complex, but on the interior he actually possesses an inferiority complex.
A little respect, Stan. Something you should have given me.
What good would that do? Where would it even go? But to the bottomless, gaping pit of insecurity you call a soul.
Knowing that all his powers come from a drug as often brought forward by Stan Edgar, the CEO of Vought, Homelander understands that his powers are not completely legitimate and that he was manufactured to be a product for Edgar, and that Vought at its core is a pharmaceutical company. Furthermore, Edgar constantly makes it clear that Homelander needs him, and that Homelander is not as smart as he thinks he is, and it's clear that these words get to him.
That you are under a misconception. That we are a superhero company. We are not. What we are, really, is a pharmaceutical company. And you are not our most valuable asset. That would be our confidential formula for Compound V, which you, man-child that you are, released into the wild.
This narcissism becomes a significant aspect of his ASPD, impairing his ability to empathize and connect with others. Nonetheless, underneath his facade of grandeur, Homelander grapples with a subtle inferiority complex due to his respect and admiration coming from Compound V and not his true personality, creating this internalized imposter syndrome where he knows deep down that he is not supposed to be in the position that he is in. All in all, Homelander purposely time and time again uses his powers and narcissistic tendencies to assert his dominance, establishing himself as an equal or superior, all in an effort to shield himself from his underlying feelings of inadequacy. He keeps doing things that he thinks make him special and that no one else can do, constantly reaffirming himself that he is who he is because he deserves it. As his sociopathic tendencies grow, Homelander becomes increasingly ignorant to the moral compass which guides most individuals, resulting in him seeming to appear as the archetypal sociopath commonly portrayed in most films.
Looking for my approval, like I'm your daddy.
In conclusion, Homelander from The Boys stands out as a captivating and terrifying character due to his immense power and unpredictability. The discomfort he evokes in both the characters around him and the audience stems from his ability to balance between emotional unpredictability and an eerie coldness. While many may want to label him as a sociopath or a psychopath, a closer examination reveals a more nuanced portrayal. Homelander is not a textbook-born sociopath or psychopath, but rather a person who deep down possesses some diluted form of caring and loving qualities. However, his environment and superpowers has shaped him into a pseudo-sociopath, pushing him to the edge without fully crossing into sociopathy.
This exploration of the line between a non-sociopath and a sociopath demonstrates how Homelander dances dangerously close to that line, but ultimately cannot be categorized as a true sociopath. The character's complexity and internal struggle make him a captivating and intriguing presence on the screen, leaving viewers in suspense and eager to delve deeper into his psyche. We applaud The Boys for demonstrating a more realistic look at superheroes and its interesting connection to the real world and the consequences of worshipping celebrities. Not many people are as mentally strong as Bruce Wayne or Spider-Man. Not many people have such good moral compasses. Not many people are okay with being guardian angels after a traumatic incident, especially without getting any recognition for it. However, these people can sometimes be more complex than outright villains. They can still crave things a hero has, like love, admiration, and validation. Thus, the concept of a soup, and more specifically, Homelander, is born. The Boys once again delivers an extremely interesting and unique take, proving itself as one of the most interesting and unique shows for the time being.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to check out our other pop culture analysis videos for more interesting takes like this one, and also make sure to check out our second channel where the content will be more loose and comedy centered. We've uploaded a funny flash review that we think you guys would really enjoy. Thanks again, and tune in next time.